In the rural town of Maple Hill, deep in the forests of Wisconsin, there was a local legend about a clown who lived in the woods. No one knew its name, but stories passed down warned people to stay away from the old, abandoned carnival grounds at the edge of town. Kids dared each other to go there, but most were too scared. The ones who ventured too close would hear faint laughter or see flashes of red and white in the shadows. For years, it was just a ghost story, until one autumn night, a group of teenagers decided to put the legend to the test. Jake, the leader of the group, was determined to prove the clown was just a myth. Along with his friends Katie, Sam, and Riley, they set out into the woods with flashlights, equipped with their phones to record any proof they could find. The deeper they ventured, the darker and eerier the woods became. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, and the only sound was the crunching of leaves beneath their feet. They joked and laughed to keep their nerves in check, but each of them felt the growing unease. After what felt like hours, they found it. Rusted carnival rides half buried in overgrown weeds, the skeletal remains of what was once a vibrant, bustling amusement park. They crept closer to the Ferris wheel, its creaking metal groaning in the wind.
Suddenly, Sam froze.
"Did you hear that?" he whispered. It was faint, but unmistakable, the sound of children giggling. The laughter echoed around them, too distant to pinpoint. "It's just the wind," Katie said, but even she didn't sound convinced. Then, from behind the carousel, a figure emerged. It was tall, gangly, and dressed in a tattered clown suit. Its face was painted in vibrant colors, but the makeup was smeared and cracked, revealing pale skin underneath. In its hand, it held a long balloon, twisted into the shape of a noose. Jake's bravado evaporated. "We need to go," he said, backing away, but the clown was already moving, its steps slow, deliberate, each one causing the leaves to crackle unnervingly under its large shoes. Panic set in, and the group sprinted back toward the way they came. But no matter how fast they ran, they could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind them, and that laughter, endless, mocking, growing louder. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, only 3 of them made it back. Sam was gone, lost in the dark. When they reported it to the authorities, a search party was sent out, but Sam was never found. Weeks later, the remaining friends received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single balloon, twisted into the shape of a noose, and a Polaroid of Sam, his face frozen in terror, standing next to the smiling clown. The Williams family was known for throwing the biggest and best birthday parties in their suburban Ohio neighborhood. Every year, for their son Timmy's birthday, they spared no expense, with inflatable castles, magicians, and clowns to entertain the kids. But this year, they decided to hire a new clown, a man who had left a flyer in their mailbox simply labeled Giggles. When Giggles arrived, there was something off about him. He was tall, much taller than a typical clown, with long, spindly limbs and a face that seemed to have been stretched too tight under his makeup. His grin never wavered, and his eyes seemed to follow people, even when they weren't looking directly at him. But the kids loved him. He made balloon animals, performed tricks, and told jokes that had the children in hysterics. It wasn't until the games began that things started to take a dark turn. Timmy's mother, Susan, noticed Giggles leading a group of children into the woods behind their house, saying they were going on a treasure hunt. She followed them at a distance, uneasy, but when she got closer, the children were gone. Only Giggles stood there, smiling wide, holding a red balloon. "Where are the kids?" she demanded, panic rising in her throat. But Giggles didn't answer. He simply tilted his head, the grin never leaving his face. And then, without a word, he turned and vanished into the trees. Frantic, Susan called the police. But when they arrived, there was no sign of Giggles or the children. It was as if they had never been there. Over the following weeks, missing posters lined the streets, but no leads turned up. The Williams family was shattered, but they couldn't shake the feeling that Giggles was still watching, waiting. One night, weeks after the party, Susan woke to the sound of laughter coming from the balcony. She ran to the window and saw him, Giggles standing in the yard holding a silhouettes of the missing children, their faces pale and lifeless, their hollow eyes staring back at them. Subway station known as Station 13. No one used it anymore. It was rumored to be the ghost of a clown who had once performed in the underground tunnels for passengers in the early 1900s. They called him Mr. Chuckles, a once famous performer who had lost everything when his circus troupe collapsed. After falling into depression, Mr. Chuckles wandered the subway, performing for spare change. One night, he was found dead on the tracks, his face frozen in a grotesque smile, his eyes wide open as if he had seen something horrifying before the end. Decades later, the legend of Mr. Chuckles remained, and curious thrill-seekers would dare each other to go down to Station 13 to try and catch a glimpse of his ghost. Alex, a young photographer with a fascination for urban legends, decided to explore the abandoned station one night. Armed with only his camera, he climbed down into the dark, damp tunnels. As he snapped pictures of the decaying walls and graffiti-covered platforms, he heard the faint sound of a circus tune carried on the stale air. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, but he pressed his curiosity peaked. The music grew louder, and soon he saw the flickering light of an old marquee sign, glowing faintly in the distance. As he approached, he saw him, Mr. Chuckles, standing on the platform, his face painted in the same garish colors as the photos he had seen of the clown. But something was wrong. Mr. Chuckles wasn't just a ghost. His face was twisted, the smile too wide, the eyes too large. And as Alex raised his camera to take a picture, the clown moved toward him, the sound of his laughter bouncing off the walls of the subway. Alex tried to run, but no matter how fast he moved, Mr. Chuckles was always running. The last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him was the grotesque grin, and the sound of the circus tune echoing in his ears. The next morning, the police found Alex's camera lying in the subway. The photos inside were of an empty station, except for one. The final image showed Mr. Chuckles, standing right behind Alex, his eyes glowing with malice. It was supposed to be the highlight of the summer. The traveling carnival had come to town, and everyone in the small town of Riverton was buzzing with excitement. The carnival was filled with rides, games, and most of all, its clowns. But there was one clown that everyone talked about. Patches wasn't like the others. His costume was old, patched together from different areas. His face was always lit up like a the other clowns. Patches stayed in the shadows, watching from a distance. Stories about Patches. Some said he had been with the carnival for decades, never aging, always lurking in the background. Others said he had a dark past, that he had been responsible for the disappearance of children at previous carnival stops. But no one could prove it. One night, after the carnival had closed, Lily and her friends decided to sneak in for some late-night fun. They laughed and played around, taking pictures on the empty rides. But as they wandered deeper into the carnival, they found themselves standing in front of Patch's tent. The entrance was flanked by two tall, grinning clown statues, their painted faces eerily lifelike in the moonlight. "Let's check it out," one of Lily's friends dared. Reluctantly, they entered the tent. Inside, it was dark and musty, filled with old carnival props and broken mirrors. The air felt thick, as if something or someone was watching them. Then, from the shadows, Patches emerged. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, his masked face staring at them. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. "We should go," she whispered. But before they could leave, the tent flap slammed shut behind them. Patches began to move, slowly at first, then faster, his mismatched clothes rustling as he darted toward them. The laughter started deep, low and guttural, filling the air. The friends scattered, but no matter which way they ran, Patches was always there, appearing from the shadows, his eyes gleaming with sinister glee. Lily made it out of the tent and ran toward the exit of the sanctuary, her heart pounding in her chest. But when she looked back, Patches was standing at the gate, holding a balloon in one hand, waving goodbye. The next day, the carnival had vanished, and so had Lily's friends. She was the only one left, but every night, she heard the sound of distant carnival music outside her window, and a shadowy figure standing in her yard, holding a red balloon. When Sophie turned 7, her parents hired a clown named Jingles for her birthday party in their quiet suburban home in Georgia. Jingles came highly recommended, known for being a kid's favorite. He arrived in a multicolored suit with a big red nose and floppy shoes, his face painted in exaggerated expressions. From the moment Sophie saw Jingles, she didn't like him. There was something off about his eyes. They were too sharp, too aware. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Jingles performed tricks and made new moves. Every now and then, Sophie would catch him staring at her without unseriousness. As the day went on, Sophie's eyes were something wasn't right with Jingles. Sounds coming from the hallway. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but then she heard it again. The unmistakable squeak of clown shoes. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The door to her room standing in the doorway was Jingles, holding a single red balloon. His face was no longer painted in bright colors. The makeup had smeared, revealing pale, sickly skin underneath. His smile was wider now, his teeth sharp. "I came to play," he whispered, his voice rasping like sandpaper. Sophie screamed, but no sound came out. She tried to run, but her feet wouldn't move. Jingles stepped closer, the balloon bobbing in his hand, his eyes gleaming in the dark. The next morning, Sophie's parents found her bed empty. The only clue was a deflated red balloon lying on the pillow, and the faint sound of laughter echoing through the house. The police searched for Sophie for weeks, but she was never found. Every year on her birthday, her parents would wake to find a single red balloon tied to her window, with a note that simply said, "Jingles was here." In the heart of Arizona, nestled in the quiet desert town of Pineview, the residents had long forgotten the dilapidated funhouse that sat on the outskirts. It had been abandoned for over 50 years, ever since the last Mexican carnival left without warning, leaving behind empty tents, rusted rides, and a broken-down fireplace. The building's exterior had been taken over by sand and time, but a faded sign above the door still read, "Clown's Paradise." One evening, 5 college students from out of town, drawn by urban legends, decided to explore the funhouse. They were a group of thrill seekers, always looking for the next to check off their list. Emily, Jason, Connor, Lily, and Matt arrived just before sunset, flashlights and cameras in hand, excited for the scare. The moment they stepped inside, chills the once colorful mural faces now filled with disturbing shapes. As they ventured deeper, he was leading the group, laughed nervously, but no one could shake the feeling that they were being watched. The funhouse was a maze of narrow hallways, cracked mirrors, and dead ends. The deeper they went, the more they felt lost, as if the funhouse had shifted behind them, trapping them. That's when Emily saw it, a flicker of movement at the edge of her flashlight. She spun around, shining the light on a clown, standing still at the end of the hallway. It wasn't a statue. Its eyes followed them, but its body remained frozen in place, like a grotesque mannequin. They ran. Panic set in, and no one could find the exit. Every corner they turned brought them back to more mirrors, each one reflecting the same clown, always a little closer. Jason, desperate to find a way out, charged down the hallway but tripped. The group screamed when they realized what he had tripped over. Another clown, this one lying on the floor, grinning with its arms outstretched, as though it had been waiting for him. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The clowns moved. Every mirror, every corner, was filled with their figures, twitching, advancing, their painted smiles stretching wider. Emily cried out as the sound of maniacal laughter filled the air. The walls seemed to close in, the floor shifting beneath them, and in every reflection, the clowns danced toward them, their glassy eyes gleaming with malicious joy. Only two of the group made it out alive by morning. They stumbled out, exhausted and terrified, but when the townsfolk found them, their hair had turned white in fear. The others were never seen again, and the only thing left of them was the sound of distant, mocking laughter that echoed through the forest, long after they had gone. In a small settlement in Georgia, there was a tradition. Each year, the town square would be transformed into a fairground, complete with games, the highlight of the festival was always the clown parade. A line of clowns marching through the streets, handing out candy and champagne. Most of the clowns. No one knew where Smiley Jack came from. He simply appeared each year, his face painted in exaggerated colors, his clothes pristine and meticulously tailored. The children adored him, but the adults kept their distance. There was something unsettling about his smile. Too wide, too fixed, like a mask he couldn't remove. That year, the festival started as it always did, with laughter and music filling the air. But something felt off. Smiley Jack was there, standing silently at the edge of the parade, his balloon twisting into strange, intricate shapes. As night fell, parents noticed that children were going missing, disappearing from the fairgrounds without a trace. Lily, a mother of two, had brought her daughter Emma to the festival that night. When she turned around for just a moment, Emma was gone. Panic set in, soon others realized their children were missing too. The town went into a frenzy, searching every inch of the fairgrounds. Smiley Jack was nowhere to be found. As the hours passed, the search led the townspeople to the old abandoned school on the edge of town, a place long rumored to be haunted. The doors were open, and inside, the walls were lined with old, dusty mirrors. In each reflection, the children appeared, their faces pale and frozen in fear, trapped behind the glass. And in the center of the room stood Smiley Jack, his balloon twisting and untwisting in his hands, his grin wider than ever. He beckoned to the parents, his voice low and melodic. "Come closer. See what happens when you smile too long." With a flick of his wrist, the balloons in his hand formed a large, twisted figure of a child. Its eyes hollow, its body limp. The mirrors began to distort, and the faces of the children behind them contorted into grotesque versions of their former selves. Lily screamed, pounding on the glass, but it didn't break. Smiley Jack's laughter echoed through the room, and as the parents watched in horror, the mirrors shattered. Their children were gone, replaced by twisted balloon versions that now littered the floor. And Smiley Jack, he simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but his eerie smile painted on the walls. 3. In a forgotten part of Detroit, a once famous toy factory had long been abandoned. Known for creating intricate wind-up clowns in the 1950s, the factory had been the pride of the city until an accident claimed the lives of several workers, leading to its closure. For decades, the factory stood empty, its windows broken, and its machinery covered in dust. It was said that the spirit of the factory's owner, Mr. Cuthbert, a reclusive man who loved the clowns, still roamed the halls. His obsession with clowns had driven the man toward the end of his life. He was literally died while trying to build a life-sized wind-up clown. One night, Marcus, the leader, had always been fascinated by forgotten places, and the eerie stories surrounding the factory only fueled his curiosity. Along with his friends Jenna, Max, and Sarah, they entered the building, cameras rolling. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the old machinery groaned as if it hadn't been touched in years. The group wandered through the factory floor, where hundreds of old, broken clown toys lay discarded, their painted faces cracked and peeling. They ventured deeper, eventually stumbling upon a hidden room at the back of the factory. In the center of the room stood a massive wind-up clown, its eyes closed, its mouth frozen in a grotesque smile. The key in its back was wound tight, ready to spring to life. Jenna moved closer to examine it, but before she could touch it, the clown's eyes snapped open. The room filled with the sound of creaking gears as the clown slowly turned its head toward them. It began to move, stiffly at first, then faster, its arms reaching out, its joints screeching with each motion. The group backed away, but the clown kept advancing, its mouth opening wide to reveal rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Suddenly, the other toys in the room began to twitch and move, their small hands reaching out, their wind-up mechanisms grinding to life. The explorers tried to flee, but the doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. As the wind-up clown closed in, the cameras captured their last moments. The sound of gears turning, the laughter of the toys, and the screams that echoed through the factory long after the footage ended. For, in the bustling city of New Orleans, there was a bar on Bourbon Street that was unlike any other. The painted face was a small, dimly lit establishment, famous for its collection of antique clown memorabilia. The walls were adorned with clown masks, costumes, and old photographs of clowns from carnivals long gone. One rainy evening, Ethan, a tourist visiting from Mardi Gras, stumbled into the painted face, seeking shelter from the storm. He ordered a drink and found himself drawn to the back of the bar, where a life-sized clown mannequin stood in the corner, dressed in a faded circus costume. Its face was painted in soft pastels, its eyes wide and staring. Ethan asked the bartender about it. "Oh, that's Lucius, a regular performer here back in the 1920s. The bartender explained. Legend has it Lucius never took off his makeup, even after the show. Some say he lived and died as a clown. Others say he's still here, watching over the place." Ethan laughed it off, but as the night wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling of his He decided to take a closer look, stepping up to the figure. For a moment, he thought he saw the mannequin's mouth twitch, shrugging it off as a trick. But as the bar grew quieter and the last of the patrons left, he heard it, a faint giggle coming from the direction of the mannequin. He turned around, but Lucius stood still, his painted smile frozen in place. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Ethan felt a cold breeze sweep through the bar, and when he looked back at Lucius, the mannequin was no longer in its corner. Instead, it was standing right behind him, its hand resting on his shoulder, its face inches from his. Terrified, Ethan jumped up, knocking over his drink. He ran for the door, but no matter how hard he pushed, it wouldn't open. The lights flickered again, and Lucius's voice, low and raspy, echoed through the bar. "Stay a while. Let's have a little fun." Ethan turned to see the mannequin slowly moving toward him, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. As it approached, its painted smile widened, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth. The last thing Ethan saw before the lights went out was Lucius's face, grinning down at him, his painted lips stretching impossibly wide. The next morning, the bartender found the bar in disarray. The mannequin was back in its corner, and Ethan was gone. All that remained was a single red clown nose, sitting on the bar, and a faint laugh that echoed through the empty room. 5. In the quiet town of Bakersville, Ohio, there was a local legend about a clown that appeared in the woods every Halloween. Giggles, they called him. According to the story, Giggles had been part of a traveling circus that visited the town decades ago. During one particularly stormy night, the circus tent collapsed, killing most of the performers, including Giggles. But ever since, people claimed to see a clown wandering the woods, his twisted smile illuminated by the moonlight. Megan and her friends had grown up hearing the stories but never believed them. This Halloween, they decided to prove the legend wrong. Armed with flashlights and bravado, Megan, Tom, Rachel, and Derek ventured into the woods just as the sun set. The woods were eerily quiet, the only sound being the crunch of leaves under their feet. As they walked deeper into the forest, Tom, the skeptic of the group, laughed. I can't believe people are scared of a clown that doesn't even exist. But just as he finished speaking, a strange sound echoed through the trees. A high-pitched giggle, faint and unmistakable. The group froze. Did you hear that? Megan whispered, her heart pounding. Rachel shrugged it off. Giggling grew louder, closer. It seemed to come from all directions at once, surrounding them. Panic set in, and they began to run. Fast they moved, the laughter followed. Megan tripped, falling into a small clearing. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a clown, his face pale and grotesque, his eyes wide and red, his mouth stretched into the his teeth small and limp, a rabbit or maybe something worse. Giggles tilted his head, the balloon bobbing in the air as he took a step forward. His laughter echoed through the clearing, a sound so unnatural it sent chills down Megan's spine. She scrambled to her feet and ran, her friends right behind her. But no matter how far they ran, Giggles was always there, his smile never fading, his eyes locked onto them. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, they were breathless and terrified. They never spoke of what they saw that night, but every Halloween, Megan heard it. The sound of Giggles echoing from the woods, growing louder and louder, until she couldn't ignore it anymore.